The morning sun peeked through the curtains as Beth Morgan rose before dawn, just as she had done every day for the past 3 years. Outside her bedroom window, the Montana landscape stretched out across her 40 acres, rolling fields, a small apple orchard, and beyond that, the dense tree line marking the edge of her property. This land was her peace, her refuge, and most importantly, the future she was building for her daughter. Beth splashed cold water on her face and glanced at the mirror. At 36, her face had a weathered toughness that came from years under the harsh sun in faraway deserts. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes, those were different now. They had softened since leaving the military, but still carried the alertness that had kept her and her team alive during 3 tours as a Green Beret sniper. She pulled on her work boots and farm clothes, moving quietly past her daughter's room. 8-year-old Lily was still asleep, her small chest rising and falling peacefully, clutching the stuffed rabbit that had been a gift from her father. Beth paused at the doorway, allowing herself a moment to watch her child. 3 years had passed since the training accident that took her husband, but Lily still asked about him sometimes, especially before bed. "Daddy was a soldier too, right, Mom?" "Yes, sweetie, one of the best." What Beth never mentioned was how she had been one of the best too, one of the first women to qualify for the Special Forces, with confirmed shots at distances that earned her quiet respect among even the most seasoned operators. That life seemed worlds away now as she headed downstairs to start the morning chores. The locals in the nearby town of Pine Creek knew her only as the hard-working single mom who had moved in to restore the old Jensen place. They were friendly enough, though kept a respectful distance, typical Montana style. To them, she was just trying to make a go of it with her small herd of cattle and the vegetables she sold at the weekend farmers market. Her daughter was doing well in the local school, making friends and joining the soccer team last spring. No one in town suspected that the quiet woman who bought feed at the co-op had once lain motionless for 18 hours in mountain terrain, waiting for a high-value target, or that she could assemble her rifle blindfolded in under 30 seconds. The medals and commendations stayed locked in a fireproof box in her closet, alongside the folded flag from her husband's funeral. After feeding the animals and checking the fence line, Beth walked to the far corner of her property. Here, hidden from the road and shielded by a natural fold in the land, she had set up a small shooting range. This morning ritual was the one part of her old life she couldn't bring herself to abandon completely. Twice a week, before Lily woke up, Beth would spend 30 minutes maintaining her skills. The familiar weight of the rifle, the controlled breathing, the perfect stillness, it centered her in a way nothing else could. Just a habit, she would tell herself, like riding a bike or swimming. But deep down, Beth knew these skills were part of who she was, carved into her by years of training and combat. She never imagined she would need these abilities again in this peaceful valley, with its friendly neighbors and sleepy town meetings. After finishing her practice, Beth carefully locked her rifle away in the hidden safe beneath the floorboards of the barn, separate from the shotgun she kept in the house for normal farm protection. Then she headed back to the farmhouse, where Lily would be waking up soon, needing breakfast before the school bus arrived. As she walked the dirt path back to the house, Beth noticed a truck she didn't recognize driving slowly past her property. It wasn't unusual for lost tourists to end up on these back roads, but something about the way the driver studied her land made the hair on the back of her neck stand up, an instinct she had learned never to ignore. Beth waved casually as if greeting a neighbor, mentally noting the license plate and the silhouettes of what looked like 3 men inside. The truck didn't wave back. Instead, it accelerated slightly and continued down the road, dust billowing behind its tires. Probably nothing, Beth thought, but she made a mental note to check her boundary fences again later. This valley was changing, new people moving in, old farms being sold off. She hoped the peaceful life she had built here for Lily would stay just that, peaceful. She had no way of knowing that the truck's occupants would soon shatter that peace, or that the skills she had locked away would become her family's only hope for survival. The first signs of trouble came with the changing leaves of autumn. Beth was stacking firewood against the side of the barn when she noticed Tom Wilson, who owned the general store in town, pulling up a gravel driveway. His old pickup truck rattled to a stop, and he stepped out looking uneasy. "Morning, Beth," he called, his usual cheerful greeting replaced with something more forced. Beth straightened up, wiping sawdust from her hands. "Morning, Tom. Everything okay?" "Thought you should know," he said, lowering his voice though nobody else was around for miles. A motorcycle gang's moved into the old Henderson place, calling themselves the Black Hornets. Beth kept her face neutral, but her mind was already calculating what this might mean. "Any trouble so far?" "Not exactly trouble, but—" Tom shifted his weight. "They've been asking questions about properties in the valley, offering cash buyouts. The Rogers family sold last week, took half what their land was worth just to get away quick." That night, after tucking Lily into bed, Beth sat at her kitchen table with a mug of tea and her laptop. A quick search confirmed what Tom had told her. The Black Hornets had a reputation that stretched across 3 states. They weren't just a motorcycle club. They were organized crime with fingers in everything from drugs to weapons. Their pattern was always the same: move into rural areas, push out locals, use the isolated properties for their operations. 2 days later, Beth saw them for herself. She was in town picking up feed when 3 motorcycles and a black SUV pulled up outside the diner. The men who stepped out wore leather vests with the Hornet patch on the back. They moved with the swagger of people used to being feared. One man in particular caught her attention, tall, with a shaved head and a scar running down his neck. The others deferred to him, stepping aside as he entered the diner first. Beth loaded her truck and drove home, her mind working through what she'd seen. The leader had scanned the street with the practiced eye of someone assessing threats. Military, maybe, or ex-police gone bad. Either way, he was dangerous. The following week, fence posts along her north property line were knocked down and tire tracks cut through her winter wheat field. The local sheriff, a new guy named Rick Parker, took his time coming out to file a report. "Probably just kids," he said, not even bothering to look at the tracks closely. "I wouldn't worry." But Beth worried. The tire width matched heavy motorcycles, not teenage pranksters. And the damage formed a clear message: we can get to you anytime. Then came the pickup truck again, the same one she'd spotted earlier. This time it stopped, and a man in expensive boots and a leather jacket stepped out. He introduced himself as Mike, though Beth doubted that was his real name. "Beautiful place you've got," he said, looking around with appraising eyes. "Must be hard maintaining all this on your own." "We manage just fine," Beth replied, positioning herself between the stranger and her house, where Lily was doing homework. "I represent some investors," he said, pulling out a business card that looked too new and clean. "They've taken an interest in this valley. We'd like to make you an offer on your farm." The amount he mentioned was insultingly low, barely enough to buy a small apartment in the city. "Not interested," Beth said firmly. "This land isn't for sale." Mike's friendly smile didn't reach his eyes. "Think about it. Raising a kid alone isn't easy. This kind of money could give you both a fresh start somewhere easier." When he left, Beth watched his truck all the way to the main road, memorizing the license plate number. That evening, she pulled out her phone and called an old friend from her military days who now worked in law enforcement. The conversation was brief but informative. The Black Hornets were expanding their territory, and the Henderson property was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Beth noticed unfamiliar vehicles driving slowly past her farm. Twice she found her mailbox smashed. When Lily came home upset because kids at school had asked if her mom was going to jail, Beth knew the rumors were being planted deliberately. The final warning came when Beth discovered her barn door open one morning. Nothing was taken, but on the wall, someone had spray-painted a crude Black Hornet. The message couldn't have been clearer: "We can get to your child, your animals, your home." That night, after checking all the doors and windows twice, Beth went to the loose floorboard in her bedroom closet. The metal box she pulled out contained more than just medals now. It held her past, her training, and possibly the only chance her family had for a future. "So that's how it's going to be," she whispered to herself, running her fingers over her old tactical gear. The time for playing the quiet farmer was ending. These men had picked the wrong woman to intimidate. Beth woke to the sound of her phone buzzing at 5 in the morning. The text message was simple: "Final offer. Sell by end of month or face consequences." No signature needed. She knew exactly who it was from. She deleted the message and made coffee, watching the sunrise from her kitchen window. 3 months of pressure, and now they were making their final move. Beth had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but deep down, she'd known it would. People like the Black Hornets didn't back down. They took what they wanted. After dropping Lily at school, Beth drove to the bank in the neighboring town, not the local one where gossip traveled fast. She withdrew a significant amount of cash from her savings and drove an extra hour to a hunting supply store where nobody knew her. There, she bought additional ammunition, emergency supplies, and a new prepaid phone. That evening, she sat Lily down for a talk. "How would you like to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a little while?" Beth asked, keeping her voice light as they cleared the dinner dishes. Lily looked up, her blue eyes curious. "Like a vacation." "Something like that. I need to do some big repairs around the farm. It'll be noisy and dusty, not much fun for you." "Is this because of those men who keep driving by? The ones you think I don't notice?" Beth sometimes forgot how observant her daughter was. "Partly," she admitted. "Some people want our farm, and they're not being very nice about it." "Can't you call the police?" Beth chose her words carefully. "Sometimes the police can't help right away. But don't worry. I know how to handle this. Remember how I told you I used to solve problems for the government before you were born? This is one of those times when those skills might come in handy." The next morning, Beth drove Lily to her grandparents' house 2 counties over. She explained to them that there was some trouble with developers pressuring landowners, keeping her explanation vague enough to avoid worry, but serious enough to ensure they'd keep Lily safe. Back at the farm, Beth walked her property line, mentally mapping every approach, every blind spot, every natural advantage the land offered. Tonight would be about preparation. She went to the loose floorboard in her closet and pulled up not just the small box of metals, but the larger waterproof case hidden beneath it. Inside was everything she had hoped never to use again: her service pistol, her customized M24 sniper rifle, night vision goggles, tactical gear, and communications equipment. She ran her fingers over the rifle case. This wasn't the same as her practice rifle she used at the small range. This was the real thing, the tool that had kept her and her team alive in places where survival wasn't guaranteed. Beth spent the afternoon setting up a secure space in the root cellar beneath her pantry. She moved food, water, medical supplies, and extra ammunition down there, along with a small cot. If things went wrong, she needed a fallback position. As evening approached, Beth changed into dark clothes and prepared her gear. She applied camo face paint with practiced precision, the muscle memory returning instantly, though it had been years. In the bathroom mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The farm woman was gone, replaced by the soldier she'd once been. Beth drove her truck to the back of her property and left it hidden among the trees. Then she made her way through the woods on foot, moving silently toward the old Henderson place, now the Black Hornets compound. She found a position on a wooded hill overlooking their property. Through her night vision, she counted 7 motorcycles, 3 trucks, and at least 12 men moving around. More concerning was the shipment they were unloading, crates that required 2 men to carry being moved into a reinforced storage shed. Beth took photos with a long-range lens, documenting license plates, faces, and the crates. For 3 hours, she observed their patterns, noting guard rotations and identifying the leader, the same bald man with the neck scar she'd seen in town. The others called him Ray. He was clearly ex-military himself. She could tell by the way he moved and directed the others. When Beth had gathered enough intelligence, she slipped away as silently as she had arrived, leaving no trace of her presence. Back at the farm, she secured her property, setting up motion sensors at key points along the perimeter and preparing defensive positions. As she finally lay down to rest at 2 a.m., Beth checked her phone to see a picture of Lily smiling with her grandparents. She touched the screen gently, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just about keeping her farm anymore. This was about making sure her daughter had a safe place to come home to. "Come and try," she whispered into the darkness. "I'd faced worse than you in places much scarier than this." The farm sat quiet under a moonless sky. Beth had turned off all the lights hours ago, making the farmhouse look empty to anyone watching from a distance. A gentle wind rustled through the cornfield, masking any small sounds and providing perfect cover for movement. Beth wasn't in the house. She had positioned herself in the hayloft of the barn, where she had a clear view of all approaches to her property. Through her night vision goggles, the darkness transformed into shades of green, revealing every detail of her land. Her rifle rested beside her, not yet assembled. She wouldn't touch it unless absolutely necessary. At 11:42 p.m., Beth spotted the first sign of movement at the edge of her property. A shadow separated from the tree line, someone moving in a crouch toward her fence line. Within minutes, a second figure appeared from a different direction. Then a third. Beth remained perfectly still, controlling her breathing just as she had been trained to do years ago. The intruders were using military-style hand signals. These weren't ordinary troublemakers. They moved with the coordination of men who had training. Beth counted 6 in total, approaching from different angles to surround the main house. One carried bolt cutters for the fence, the others had hunting rifles slung across their backs. Just like old times, Beth whispered to herself, though there was no humor in her voice. She watched as they cut through her fence and began moving toward the farmhouse. Their plan was obvious: surround the house, damage the property, and scare her enough to leave. They didn't expect resistance. They certainly didn't expect what was about to happen. Beth had already decided she wouldn't use deadly force. These men deserved prison, not graves. But they needed to learn a very important lesson about who they were dealing with. She assembled her rifle with practiced movements, each piece clicking into place silently. Through the scope, she could see their faces clearly: the nervous young one, the bearded man giving directions, the tall one with a military tattoo visible on his forearm. One of the men paused near the old tractor, pulled out a can, and began pouring liquid around its base. Gasoline. They were planning to burn her equipment. Beth took aim at the ground 3 feet in front of him and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the night air. The bullet kicked up dirt exactly where she intended. The man jumped back, dropping the gas can. Before they could react, she fired again, this time hitting the ground near another man who was approaching her chicken coop with a crowbar. Perfect placement, exactly where she aimed. The men scrambled for cover, confused and shouting to each other. They hadn't expected gunfire, especially not such precise shots that deliberately missed them. Who's shooting? Is she in the house? I thought she was supposed to be alone. Beth fired a third shot into a fence post just above where 2 men were huddled behind her garden shed. Wood splintered exactly where she'd aimed. One of the men made a run for the trees. Beth let him go. Then she fired again, the bullet hitting the ground between the feet of the bearded leader. He froze, then dropped to the ground. "We're surrounded," someone shouted. Beth almost smiled at that. They thought they were facing multiple shooters. She fired again, making it seem like the shot came from a different position. The remaining men began retreating toward the tree line, keeping low. Beth allowed them this dignity, firing only to guide their path away from her property. When they reached their vehicles hidden on the access road, Beth took careful aim at the front tire of their pickup truck. The shot hit perfectly, the tire deflating with a hiss. She did the same to one of their motorcycles. "Let's go," the bearded man yelled. They squeezed into the remaining vehicles and sped away, leaving behind the damaged truck and motorcycle. Beth watched until their taillights disappeared. Then she waited another hour, perfectly still, in case they returned. When she was certain they were gone, she climbed down from the hayloft and walked her property line, checking for any men left behind and assessing the damage. The bolt cutters lay abandoned by the fence. The gas cassette spilled by the tractor. Beth gathered these items as evidence, then repaired what she could of the cut fence. As dawn broke, Beth sat on her porch with a cup of steaming coffee, watching the sunrise. She pulled out her phone and called her daughter. "Morning, sweetheart. Yes, everything's fine here." Her voice was steady and calm. "How are things with Grandma and Grandpa? Having fun?" As she spoke, Beth noticed a black crow landing on the abandoned motorcycle the men had left behind. The bird seemed to study her for a moment before flying away. Beth knew this wasn't over. The men would report back to their leader. They would tell him about the mysterious shooter who had anticipated their every move. They would be back, and next time they wouldn't underestimate her. But next time, Beth would be even more prepared. The morning after the nighttime confrontation, Beth drove into town for supplies, trying to maintain her normal routine. As she pulled into the feed store parking lot, She immediately noticed people glancing her way, then quickly looking away. Word traveled fast in small towns. "Morning, Pete," she greeted the store owner as she walked in. Pete, who had always been friendly, barely met her eyes. "Beth," he said with a nod, then busied himself arranging feed bags that were already perfectly stacked. As Beth collected her supplies, she overheard two men talking in the next aisle. "Heard there was some kind of shootout at the Morgan place last night. That's what Ray's boys are saying. Claimed they were just driving by and got shot at for no reason." Beth clenched her jaw but kept shopping. She'd expected this. The Black Hornets would try to turn the town against her, make her look like the problem. At the counter, Pete finally spoke more than one word. "Your usual delivery coming up Thursday, though might be late. Driver called in sick." Beth knew what that meant. No delivery was coming. "I'll take what I can fit in my truck today then," she said evenly, adding more bags to her order. As she loaded her truck, a sheriff's department vehicle pulled up beside her. Sheriff Rick Parker stepped out, adjusting his belt importantly. "Morning, Ms. Morgan. Heard there was some disturbance out your way last night." Beth straightened up. "Some trespassers tried to vandalize my property. They had guns and gasoline. I encouraged them to leave." "Uh-huh." The sheriff didn't write anything down. "And you fired a weapon?" "On my own property, at people who cut through my fence and were about to burn my tractor. I shot at the ground. Nobody was hurt." Sheriff Parker scratched his neck. "Well, I've got complaints about gunfire. Might need to look into." "I'd be happy to show you the cut fence, the abandoned bolt cutters, and the gasoline can they left behind," Beth interrupted. "And my security cameras caught everything." This last part was a bluff. She had no cameras, but the sheriff wouldn't know that. He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll try to swing by later this week. In the meantime, maybe cool it with the gunplay, all right? This is a peaceful town." As Beth drove home, she noticed a black SUV following her at a distance. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. When she pulled into her driveway, her phone rang. It was Lily's school principal. "Mrs. Morgan, I need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention," the principal began, her voice uncomfortably formal. "We've received anonymous calls about your home situation being potentially unstable. As you know, we take child welfare very seriously." Beth's knuckles turned white around the phone. "My daughter is currently staying with her grandparents while I handle some farm renovations," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Has something specific prompted these calls?" "Well, there's talk about weapons and possible criminal activity. I'm obligated to look into these things." "I understand," Beth said. "I'd be happy to meet with you and discuss this further. I can also provide contact information for my in-laws where Lily is staying." After ending the call, Beth sat in her truck, a cold anger building inside her. They were attacking her from all sides now, her reputation, her livelihood, and worst of all, trying to use her daughter against her. That afternoon, she drove to the diner in town for a late lunch, something she rarely did. She wanted to be seen, to show she wasn't hiding. The conversation dimmed when she walked in, then gradually resumed. Beth took a seat at the counter and ordered coffee. The bell above the door jingled, and the entire diner went silent. Beth didn't turn around, but in the mirror behind the counter she saw him, Ray, the leader of the Black Hornets, along with two of his men. She recognized the tall one from the night before. Ray sat at a booth where he could watch her. He smiled when their eyes met in the mirror, raising his coffee cup in a mock toast. More disturbing was seeing Sheriff Parker enter a few minutes later, walking directly to Ray's table and sitting down with them, laughing like old friends. The message couldn't have been clearer. "We own this town. You're alone." Beth paid for her coffee and walked out, feeling their eyes on her back. As she passed the sheriff's cruiser, she noticed a small black device magnetically attached beneath the wheel well, a tracker. They were watching his movements too, which meant the sheriff probably wasn't corrupt, just compromised. Driving home, Beth made a decision. Plain defense wasn't working. The gang was escalating, using the community against her. It was time to gather real intelligence, the kind that could bring down their entire operation. That night, under cover of darkness, Beth prepared for a different kind of mission. Not just defending her property, but taking the fight to them. Beth sat at her kitchen table, spreading out the photos and notes she had gathered during her nighttime reconnaissance. The intelligence she'd collected over the past 3 nights painted a disturbing picture. The Black Hornets weren't just after her farm, they were systematically targeting properties throughout the entire valley. Her surveillance had revealed trucks coming and going at odd hours, crates being transferred between vehicles, and men patrolling with guard dogs at their recently acquired properties. This was bigger than simple intimidation or even a drug operation. They were setting up an entire network. Beth rubbed her tired eyes. She hadn't slept properly in days, alternating between defending her farm and gathering intelligence. She couldn't keep this up alone, no matter how well-trained she was. A knock at her door startled her. Through the window, she spotted an old blue pickup truck she recognized. It belonged to Jack Wilson, a Vietnam veteran who owned the property 3 miles down the road. Cautiously, she tucked her pistol into the back of her jeans and opened the door. "Morning, Beth," Jack said, his weathered face grim. "Got a minute to talk?" She invited him in, quickly gathering her surveillance photos from the table. "Don't bother hiding those," Jack said, nodding at the photos. "That's why I'm here. The Hornets came to my place yesterday, offered me half what my land's worth, and suggested I'd regret not taking it." Beth studied the old veteran. They'd been neighborly but never close. "Why come to me?" "Because you're the only one fighting back," he said simply. "That night with the warning shots, word got around. Most folks think you're crazy, but I recognized a tactical defense when I heard it described." Beth poured them both coffee. "I can handle my own property, but they're taking over the whole valley." "Not just our valley," Jack said. "I made some calls to buddies in the next county. Same pattern there 6 months ago. They're expanding, setting up some kind of route." As they talked, another vehicle pulled up, a newer model SUV. Beth tensed until she recognized Donna Hayes, the retired judge who had moved to the area 3 years ago. "Hope you don't mind," Jack said. "I invited her, and them too." He nodded toward a young couple just arriving in their hardware store delivery truck, Chris and Meg Taylor, who had taken over the local hardware store from Meg's father. Within minutes, Beth's kitchen was filled with neighbors sharing similar stories. The Taylors had been pressured to sell their store, which sat on a key crossroads. Judge Hayes had documentation of similar gang operations from her time on the bench. "I've been watching them for weeks," Beth admitted, finally sharing her photos. "They're using these properties to move something valuable. Drugs maybe, or weapons." Judge Hayes studied the surveillance photos. "This is organized, professional. Local law enforcement either can't or won't handle it." "Sheriff's in their pocket," Chris Taylor said. "He was at our store yesterday, suggesting we should sell to the new business group for our own safety." Beth made a decision. She went to her bedroom and returned with a worn business card. "I know someone who might help. FBI contact from my military days. But they'll need solid evidence, and they'll need time to act." "We don't have much time," Jack pointed out. "They're moving fast." "Then we buy time," Beth said. "Together." They spent the afternoon creating a plan. Judge Hayes would quietly contact trusted colleagues in federal law enforcement. The Taylors would use their delivery truck to help monitor gang movements without raising suspicion. Jack, with his extensive property bordering the national forest, would provide fallback positions if needed. Beth shared her military background with them, not every detail, but enough that they understood she had the training to lead this effort. Instead of frightening them, it seemed to give them confidence. "They think we're just scared farmers and shopkeepers," Meg Taylor said. "They don't know who they're dealing with." As the sun began to set, Beth walked her new allies to their vehicles. For the first time in weeks, she felt something besides determination and anger. She felt hope. "We meet again tomorrow night," she reminded them. "And remember, act normal during the day. Don't give them any reason to suspect we're working together." Judge Hayes paused before getting into her car. "You know, when they come at us harder, and they will, it's going to get dangerous." Beth nodded. "It's already dangerous, but now we have something they don't." "What's that?" Chris asked. "A community worth fighting for," Beth answered, "and each other's backs." As her neighbors drove away, Beth called her daughter, assuring her that she'd be able to come home soon. The promise felt real now. With help, she had a fighting chance to end this threat once and for all. Dawn broke with an eerie stillness over Beth's farm. She had been awake for hours, moving through final preparations with the calm focus that had once kept her alive in war zones. Today was the day. Her FBI contact had confirmed it. The federal raid was planned for noon, but intelligence suggested the Black Hornets were planning their own move this morning. The past week had been a blur of covert meetings and careful planning. Judge Hayes had pulled strings with former colleagues, fast-tracking the federal investigation. The Taylors had documented shipments and drop points with their delivery truck's dash cam. Jack had mapped escape routes through the forest. And Beth had coordinated it all, drawing on tactical skills that felt as natural as breathing. At 5:30 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Chris Taylor. 20 bikes just left the compound. Heading your way. Beth took a deep breath and sent the alert to her makeshift alliance. Then she walked her property one last time, checking each preparation. The disabled fence section that would funnel unwanted visitors into a predictable path. The tripwires that would alert her to movement. The reinforced positions she could fire from if necessary. This wasn't about shooting people, it was about holding ground until help arrived. At 6:15 a.m., she heard them, the rumble of motorcycles and engines approaching from the main road. Not trying to be stealthy anymore, this was a show of force. Beth watched through binoculars as they assembled at the end of her long driveway. 20 men on motorcycles, plus 3 trucks carrying more. Ray stood in front of them, pointing toward different areas of her property, giving instructions. This wasn't just intimidation, this was a coordinated attack. She picked up her phone and called Jack. They're here, at least 30 men. Are you ready? In position, the old veteran confirmed. Meg is with the FBI team, bringing them in through the back county road, 20 minutes out. Tell them to hurry, Beth said, watching the first motorcycles start moving up a driveway. And remember, no direct confrontation unless absolutely necessary. Beth moved to her first position behind the barn, rifle ready but not raised. The plan wasn't to fight them head-on. That would be suicide even for someone with her training. The plan was to confuse, delay, and contain them until the FBI arrived. The first riders hit the trip wire across the driveway. A harmless fishing line connected to cans filled with pebbles, primitive but effective. The noise startled them, making 3 bikes swerve into the soft shoulder where she deliberately weakened the ground. They bogged down immediately. The others pushed forward more cautiously now. When they reached the farmyard, one of Jack's recordings played from hidden speakers in the trees, the sound of a police radio dispatcher. Several riders froze, looking around in confusion. Beth triggered her first real trap, the irrigation sprinklers she'd redirected toward the driveway. Water sprayed across the dirt yard, instantly turning it to mud. 2 more bikes went down, riders cursing as they slipped. From the woods to the east, another recording played, this one sounding like tactical radio chatter. Beth smiled grimly as she watched several gang members point in that direction, clearly worried about being surrounded. Ray shouted orders, trying to regain control of the situation. He directed half his men toward the house, the others toward the barn where Beth had been spotted the night of the first encounter. That's when the old grain silo speakers blared to life with Jack's voice, amplified to sound like an official announcement. Attention on the property. This is a federal operation. The farm is surrounded. Put down your weapons. Confusion erupted. Some men started running back to their vehicles while others looked to Ray for direction. He was shouting, pointing at the house, trying to rally his force. Beth watched through her scope as Ray grabbed a gas can from one of the trucks. His intention was clear, burn her out. She took careful aim at the ground near his feet and fired. The shot kicked up dirt inches from Ray's boot. He stumbled back, dropping the can. 2 more precisely placed shots, at a motorcycle tire and into the ground near a group of men, added to the chaos. From the south end of her property came the beautiful sound of sirens. Through her scope, Beth saw Ray's face transform with the realization that he'd been outmaneuvered. He ran for his truck, signaling retreat. Beth moved quickly to her fallback position as gang members scattered in all directions. Some ran straight into the paths of arriving FBI vehicles. Others found their escape routes blocked by local police who had finally chosen the right side once federal agents were involved. When the FBI tactical team reached the farmyard, they found over half the gang members already contained or detained. The others, including Ray, were caught at roadblocks within the hour, their vehicles loaded with evidence of their trafficking operation. Beth watched from her porch as agents secured the scene. Judge Hayes arrived with the FBI special agent in charge, who approached Beth with newfound respect after learning of her role in the operation. "You've done what 3 county departments couldn't," the agent told her. "We've been tracking this organization for months." As the chaos settled, Beth saw a familiar car pull up, her in-laws with Lily in the back seat. Her daughter ran across the yard and into her arms. "Is it over, Mum? Can I come home now?" Beth lifted her daughter, holding her close. "Yes, sweetheart, it's all over. We're home for good." Over Lily's shoulder, Beth saw her neighbors, Jack, the Taylors, Judge Hayes, watching with tired smiles. They had stood together against those who threatened their community, each contributing what they could to protect their homes. The quiet farmer had never really disappeared. The soldier had never fully left. Beth Morgan was both, and her community was stronger for it.